What are we talking about?
Your epic boot camp.
Oh yeah, we did a compassion boot camp together. Okay, so just if anybody in there, I wrote a book almost 5 years ago. It's called 10% Happier, and one of the key characters was this woman named Spring, who I found to be quite difficult and made fun of. And a key scene in the book where I was on retreat and I was losing my mind. And there was this one teacher who was kind of driving me nuts. She wore a shawl. Are you wearing a shawl? She's wearing a shawl. And long earrings and spoke really softly. And I was, one day I was kind of really losing my mind. I needed to talk to a teacher, but my teacher was unavailable. And the only person who had time to talk to me was Spring. And she gave me advice that completely broke everything wide open for me and led to the most sort of incredible moment of my brief meditation career. And when I wrote the book, I tracked Spring down, and we didn't know each other. We had had this one interaction, and I sent her a copy of the chapter, and I said, if you want me to change your name, it's fine. I get it, because what I wrote was a little tough. And she wrote back, no, this is hilarious, don't change anything. And we've become friends, and I've started to become interested in the form of meditation, one of the forms of meditation that she specializes in, which is compassion meditation. So I'm writing a new book, a kind of a sequel about kindness, from my wise-ass take on kindness. And so I asked Spring if she'd do a one-on-one retreat with me, which we started calling a compassion boot camp. So anyway, that's the setup for this conversation. You were going to tell a little bit about your side of the story.
Yeah, and he called it the Compassion Boot Camp. At first, I called it, what about love is the answer? And he went, no, Compassion Boot Camp. So we have very different styles. And so, yes, when I met Dan, I see he was looking for his teacher, Joseph Goldstein, and Joseph was meeting with another student. And so I had a little room, kind of like, you come in for 15 minutes and I'll talk to you. So I see this wild-eyed yogi. We call them yogis while they're on retreat. And he came in and it was, when someone's about to panic, that feeling that they could leave or jump out of their skin. So we talked, and it was really funny and sweet. And then, a year later, I get this funny chapter. And it was great. I thought it was hilarious. So Dan calls me up and he says, what about we do a compassion-based retreat? You and I will come to California. I want to do this practice and then grow. And so, of course, I'm very excited. Like, yeah, come on, Dan, because he's a tough student, wouldn't you say? Like, I was like, you're ready to open your heart? And I remember right there, you go, we can't ever say that again. I refuse to participate in anything that has that terminology. So we had to always look for I was like, how are you feeling today, Dan? How does it feel in this area of your... So we reframed a lot of things, but maybe I still am so curious, like maybe share more about why did you want to do this 9-day? And it was intensive, meditating hour after hour. He was really committed. I wish we would have had a clip of it. It would have been, we joked about putting a clip together.
Well, this was not a normal retreat because we rented a house about an hour and a half south of LA. It was me and you. We had a woman there who was managing the retreat and providing the food, and then we had a camera crew. And so we have a lot of funny clips that we'll show you when the book comes out, and they are funny. A lot of Spring using terminology that makes me run away, or I couldn't run away. I didn't even have a car, so made me want to run away. Anyway, so we were doing, why did I want to do the retreat? A common critique that we often hear of modern mindfulness is that in getting away from its Buddhist roots, that something has been lost. Not always, but sometimes something has been lost. And often when people level that critique, what they're referring to is a de-emphasis on compassion. And I don't think that's true when Jon Kabat-Zinn is teaching a secular mindfulness, but I think it can be true in certain, when you read about how mindfulness is written about in the popular press, it's often about performance and success. I talk about it that way too, so I'm part of the what could be one of the challenges. But I think it's, as somebody who takes the antecedent of secular mindfulness very seriously, in other words, as somebody who considers himself a Buddhist, I see sort of an opening to talk about compassion in a way that would reach a broader audience. In my view, compassion is either talked about in sort of treacly, hallmarky, open your heart type of way, or as a sort of exhortation, or as bland platitude that with no actionable advice. And so I had in my head that I wanted to write a book about this, and at first I was thinking I would write a sort of how-to book, stealing advice from all sorts of great masters. And then it was recommended to me that I do what's called a 360 review. Does anybody know what that is? Okay, so the mirthless laughter you're hearing in certain corners of the room is an indication that somebody's been through this pain. A 360 review is a management technique where you conduct anonymous interviews with people in every aspect of your life, so you get a 360 sense of them. So your bosses, your peers, people who work for you. In the case of the 360 that I did, they also talked to a lot of people in my personal life. 16 one-hour-long anonymous interviews. And you could sum up the headline of the 41-page report that I received as "You suck from every angle."
It wasn't that
funny now. It wasn't that bad. It was pretty bad, but it wasn't that bad. You suck from pretty much every angle. And so I realized that this is not just a how-to book. This is actually a huge, life-changing, I need to change my life. And I kind of realized that I'm a quasi self-help guru who is an asshole. And that really sort of changed what I thought was going to be kind of a little narrative veneer on top of a how-to book. I realized that this is a much bigger thing, and so the project has become much more meaningful, and the book will be much more like a sequel to 10% Happier. And as part of this, I wanted to really work on this one kind of meditation known as metta, M-E-T-T-A, which we discussed a little bit with Mark Bertolini earlier, which involves, and a lot of you guys will know this, systematically envisioning various beings and then sending them good vibes. And it's very, very annoying, as I said earlier. And Spring was the first person to teach it to me, and I, hated her for it, which sounds just, poetic in some ways. But then after my little meditative breakthrough, she taught me it again. I wept on the floor of a meditation center like some New Age cliche. Anyway, so that's why I wanted to do it. And so we decided to do it for 9 days.
Yeah, and I was really surprised. I was like, well, don't you want like Jack Kornfield or Deepak Chopra? He was like, no, you from the other retreat, from that moment where you opened your heart on the floor in Marin. Yeah, and it was really, to see your sincerity, the review. And the review was mixed. It had all these beautiful things, and then, wow, it was a hammer at the end. And I reread it after the retreat, and I'd read it before. And I really felt inspired by your dedication, and I think the idea, instead of it being it was a compassion boot camp, but another way you phrased it was, how do I stop being an asshole? That was kind of the mantra. That was his inner mantra. I will stop being an asshole. I will no longer, seeing your friends and your people in your personal life write these things. And I'm sure if we all had a review like that, it would be a wake-up call. So I was appreciating your devotion. I mean, Dan was up. We had him ringing a bell at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock or 5:30?
5:30.
5:30, he would ring the bell, and he'd be, going to the little meditation area. We had a room to start the day, and he spent all day in silence, sitting and walking with these phrases. And, for a lot of people that you meet in your, world, and you get the opportunity to meet with so many people, and so do I, people like the idea of compassion, but they don't know how to actually generate it. And you grow up with the word compassion, and often it's directed at others. Well, I gave a homeless man $1. I'm so compassionate. But what we were really focusing on this retreat was self-compassion. And that, for a lot of people, is non-existent. And I feel that, as a society, is detrimental. It's detrimental to our mindfulness practice. And if you can't feel suffering or knowing how to care about it for yourself, you really don't know how to care for it in the world or in the people you see on the news or your neighbors. So for me, this breaking through for you to have those moments was very meaningful as a teacher. And we would have we would have meetings in the morning and afternoon, and Dharma talks in the evening. So we structured it like a mindfulness retreat. But I was really looking for those moments, and when they were there, I'd be like, yes, Dan's loving himself. It's day 5. It's happening. It would be like this crack in the wall. The ice was melting. and it was about you, and seeing your own struggles and the realness and the kind of courage that it takes to feel. And people want to use mindfulness in a lot of ways, but to understand, to grow really spiritually, is you have to be willing to feel discomfort. If you want to just use this to attain optimum sports experience or some kind of business experience, it's limited. And that's the danger of secularization and the greatness about it. It can be very mainstream, but you have to be willing to feel. And so for what I teach a lot of people is we got to feel the discomfort. We have to be present. Well, how? That's the next question. I don't know how to be with this. So this is a really beautiful thing that you're learning, and you'll hopefully continue. And learn how to be with what, like what Anderson was saying. His interview was really touched me in a way. It touched my heart. Like, yeah, what do I do now? Isn't that the question we all have? Oh no, what am I doing now? It's Monday, what am I doing? This kind of panic that we have.
I wouldn't say it touched my heart, but... Kidding.
It did. Remember that one day? Okay, one day, I don't know, he was like, my heart is hurting, literally right
You're not supposed to tell him this part.
We used it like, we used the more tough lingo, because I couldn't say like, your heart, let's care for your heart. It was like, okay, we'll meet it, it was kind of using this other. But something happened, right? Maybe you could just share a little bit if it's not too vulnerable.
I would say I realize in some ways that that this warmth that you can generate doesn't have to have string music. But you can have a sort of a common sense friendliness, externally and internally, that allows for what I feel is a much more genuine practice of mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Lots of ways to describe it, but one way is this it's often described as a non-judgmental acceptance of whatever's arising in your mind. Well, as Spring pointed out, I think very incisively on the retreat, that often when we're noting things that arise, anger, desire, there's a little bit of a flick to the note. It's a little bit like, yeah, I don't want this. And there's aversion in that. And when you flood your brain or your mind or your heart with these phrases of friendliness, then these difficult emotions come up, and they come up in a very different environment where it's like, all right, welcome to the party. Not only welcome to the party and sit down in the corner, I don't want to hear from you. Welcome to the party, here's a funny hat, and blow out these candles on this cake. And that changes the nature, for me, changed the nature of my relationship to all of the difficult things that arise in my mind. Restlessness, sort of nonstop ambition, everything that happens, I'm thinking, ooh, that could be 2 good paragraphs in the book, blah, 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 all the time. And instead of just flicking it away, I felt like that what you helped create for me was a state of mind where this stuff could be received differently. And I thought that was really useful. And so the moment you're talking about is as I started to see that actually there wasn't any big weepy breakthrough for me. It was more like seeing the kind of suffering I'm doing all the time that I'm kind of only peripherally aware of, is that I'm never quite comfortable right now. It's always like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I deal with this in a big way on retreats, why I've always hated going on retreats. It's so fucking boring. And you're just stuck there doing nothing. And so actually leaning into, oh yeah, okay, this is restlessness. This is an aversion. And actually greeting that with some warmth. There was like, I can't believe, was it like Rumi or somebody said, like greeting it like an old friend. And so there's something to that. And I noticed when I really tuned into that it shows up as pain in the body. And it actually, inconveniently for me, often shows up as pain in the heart area. And so I had to admit this to Spring, who, to her credit, did not gloat. But did recommend that I stand there or sit there or whatever posture I was meditating, and put my hand on my heart and sort of send the message of like, all right, it's okay to feel this. So I was in a weakened state, and I did do that. And it works, it worked for me at the very least. And so I found it all really interesting. Let me just say one last thing about Spring. It's another thing I got dinged for in the 360, and I think is a very common thing that we do, which is being judgy. And I did that to Spring in the first moment I saw her up on the stage in the shawl, and the way she talks with all these unabashed references to the heart, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, not for me. And obviously you really helped me in a moment of need, and so I got over that. But I saw on the retreat time and time again that it's easy to get fooled by external appearances, but she is incredibly smart and tough, and you can talk however you want to talk, but you have to have a real steely wisdom in order to cut through a lot of the bullshit that I was bringing to the table. And she did that in a really skillful way time and time again. So I'm grateful to you for that.
Oh.
Here,
we do have a special connection. I felt that in my heart, Dan. And we, in some ways, we are a bit of an odd couple, this like black, earthy woman who talks about the heart, and you're this New York kind of journalist and Nightline and Good Morning America. But I think there's something really beautiful in our shared dedication to these practices. There's a real care about, mindfulness and in our world, internally, externally. And, as I think about the world that we're living in, and I was so excited that you were going to write a follow-up edition to your first book. I loved your first book. But God, how much we need kindness in the world. Even just like Anderson, somebody's sending that on Instagram. Like, what? Like, who does that, And thinking about the mind state, and you were talking about that, like it hurts to be an asshole, or it's so much better when we are kind. And how do we, moving forward, create a world where kindness has value? Right now, it doesn't feel like it does, and that's painful for us all to live in, where it feels like the snarky comments or people being cruel. Politics is so harsh and so unbearable, that there's something redemptive about this seed of kindness that you can never stamp out. And you talked about that earlier, about it being, you realizing it being your nature, or, I don't know, I just thought it was nice to hear about that, some of your insights toward the end of the retreat.
Just to pick up on what you were, a couple of things. Earlier you talked about some of how secularizing meditation can be tricky, but is also great, and I agree with that. Yeah. I really do. I think that's spot on. I remember reading. I have a Google alert set on mindfulness and one on meditation, and I remember reading an article in a trade magazine for furniture dealers, and it said how mindfulness can help you sell more furniture.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, that's cool. Like, I'm cool. But like, imagine if we could do that for compassion and kindness. And I think in order to do that, we just need a different way to talk about it. Some people are cool with opening their heart. A lot of people are not cool with it, or like it doesn't mean anything to them. And I think working with you that I just have this goal that maybe this finding a new way to talk about it so that that you can go in through the door of self-interest, which is, I think, what the Buddha did quite brilliantly. And so I just have some real optimism about that. And then you said before about, what is your true nature? I don't know. I don't know what, I'm not super comfortable with metaphysical claims about, Buddha nature or whatever. I don't know. But I do know a little bit about evolution and, we're wired. There's a reason why you have to traditionally you have to really drug soldiers in order to go kill other people. Like, it doesn't feel good to do violence. And the cooperative tribes did better than the tribes that couldn't get along. And you can see the antecedents for fairness and compassion in our relatives in the ape family and chimpanzees. Frans de Waal has done amazing work on this. And so to me, it just seems obvious that there's something there, and it's just about getting people to make it a priority, and that's really what you've helped me think about doing.
Yeah, I hope that this movement grows more about, so we can have the same amount of retreats that we have for mindfulness or secular, to compassion, to these heart practices, to thinking about how we love and care for ourselves, how we navigate working with ourselves. We are our biggest challenge. There was one day where we had him doing a category of difficult people, and he realized, I am the difficult person, Spring. It's here. It's all here. Right? I was like, okay, well, let's do it for the crazy in our head, We all have these voices. And so, how we work with them. So it's evolving. And Soren did ask for us to do a 1-minute practice. Are you all up for that? We got to do the hand on the heart, though, right, Dan?
Don't.
Dan
Really?
will not put his hand there. He was doing it the whole time. Not the whole time, the second half of the retreat.
Yeah, once you broke me, I did it.
So again, we were doing this metta practice, M-E-T-T-A, and we focused a lot on just sending friendliness. You don't have to say love. Love is too intense. Can we just be friendly with ourselves in this moment? Even if you're bored, even if you're restless, even if you're tired, even if you have a headache right now, even if you're going, what are they talking about? Who cares, right? It's like so you could just close your eyes and just put your hand on your heart. Why we do this, I don't know. We just do it because this is what we do to our friends or our loved ones when they're suffering. We touch their back so just imagine you don't even have to imagine breathing. You are breathing. So just take a breath. And we're just going to offer some of the traditional phrases of the metta. There's 4. So as you just hold your hand on your heart, you just visualize yourself. You just offer, may I be happy and peaceful. May I be safe and protected. May I be healthy and strong in this body. And may I live with ease and joy and well-being. Just friendliness. All we have to do is end the war with ourselves. The war ends with everything else. Thank you. And I really want to just thank you, Dan. I feel like I've been so proud of you. I mean, I've said this many times to him. After 10% Happier came out, I was like, Yes, he did. Because you see people go on and live their lives, and you touch people or you have contact with someone, and they get something, and then they're able to share it with others. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Let's agree that we're not telling anybody else about this.